Anatoly disappeared in Monterrey after falling into a trap. What happened next will haunt you forever. I woke up in complete darkness, and the first thing I felt wasn't fear. It was rage. Pure, unfiltered rage that burned through my chest like molten iron. My hands were bound behind my back with zip ties cutting into my wrists, and my shoulders screamed from being twisted at an unnatural angle for God knows how long. The air was thick, humid, suffocating. It smelled like rust, mold, and something else I couldn't quite place. Something organic. Something dead. My head throbbed with a pain so intense I could feel my pulse hammering against my skull with every heartbeat. I tried to move, but my legs were numb, useless. How long had I been here? Hours. Days. Time becomes meaningless when you're swallowed by darkness, so complete you can't tell if your eyes are open or closed. And then I remembered. Monterrey. The gym. The woman with the scar across her cheekbone who approached me with that proposition. The way her eyes didn't match her smile. I should have seen it coming. I should have known better. But pride, that ancient demon that lives in every man who's ever lifted heavy weight, convinced me I was untouchable. Subscribe to this channel if you've ever trusted the wrong person and paid the price. The last clear memory I had was leaving the hotel, walking through the narrow streets of Barrio Antiguo as the sun set behind the Sierra Madre Mountains, painting the sky in shades of blood orange and deep purple. She had told me to meet her contact at a warehouse near the old factory district. Said there was someone who wanted to sponsor my training, someone with deep pockets and deeper connections. Said it could change everything. I should have asked more questions. I should have walked away. But when you've spent your entire life fighting your way up from nothing, when you've clawed and bled and broken yourself repeatedly just to survive, opportunities that seem too good to be true start looking like the universe finally paying its debt to you. The warehouse had been exactly what you'd expect. Corrugated metal walls, broken windows, graffiti covering every surface. The kind of place where bad things happen and nobody asks questions afterward. I walked in, and that's when everything went sideways. The lights cut out. I heard movement, multiple people, too many to fight in the dark. Something hard cracked against the back of my skull, and the world dissolved into static and pain. Now here I was, wherever here was, bound and blind and alone with my thoughts. Have you ever been completely helpless, stripped of everything that made you feel strong? In a few moments, you'll understand why this became the most important night of my entire life. I forced myself to breathe slowly, methodically, the way I'd learned during those brutal winters in Siberia when I was a kid. Panic is a luxury you can't afford when survival is the only option. I needed to assess. Hands bound, check. Legs coming back to life with that horrible pins and needles sensation, check. No gag, which meant either they didn't care if I screamed or there was nobody around to hear it. Neither option was comforting. I tested the zip ties, pulling against them carefully. They bit deeper into my wrists, and I felt warm blood start to trickle down my palms. The plastic was industrial grade, not the cheap stuff you could snap with enough force. Whoever took me knew what they were doing. This wasn't some opportunistic kidnapping. This was planned, organized, professional. My mind raced through possibilities. Was it about money? I didn't have much, but maybe they thought the YouTube channel meant I was rich. Was it personal? I'd made enemies over the years, people whose pride I'd wounded in the gym, men who couldn't handle being outlasted by someone twice their age. Or was it something worse? Something connected to the life I'd left behind, the past I'd tried so hard to bury under tons of iron and discipline? The darkness pressed against my eyes like a physical weight. I've never been afraid of the dark, not since I was 8 years old and my father locked me in the root cellar for 3 days to teach me about fear and how to conquer it. He was a hard man, my father. Cold as the Siberian wind, tough as the permafrost that cracked the foundations of our village. He believed suffering built character, that comfort made men weak. I hated him for years. Spent my adolescence planning elaborate scenarios of revenge, of showing him how strong I'd become, of proving I was better than him. But somewhere along the way, buried under all that resentment, I realized he'd given me something invaluable. He'd taught me how to endure. How to take the worst the world could throw at you and refuse to break. That's what I needed now. Endurance. Not the physical kind I developed through countless hours under the barbell, but the mental fortitude to stay calm, stay focused, stay alive. Time crawled by. I counted my breaths, used them to mark the minutes. 500 breaths. Roughly 40 minutes. 1,000 breaths. Over an hour. My wrists had gone from painful to numb where the zip ties cut circulation. My shoulders felt like they were being slowly pulled from their sockets. But I stayed present, stayed aware, waiting for any piece of information I could use. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Multiple sets. Heavy boots on concrete. Getting closer. A door creaked open somewhere ahead of me, and light exploded into my darkness like a flashbang. I squeezed my eyes shut against the sudden assault, seeing red and gold patterns dancing behind my eyelids. "He's awake," a voice said in Spanish. Male, middle-aged, with an accent I couldn't quite place. Northern Mexico, maybe Nuevo Leon or Coahuila. "Good," another voice responded. This one younger, harder. "The boss wants to talk to him before we proceed." Proceed with what? My jaw clenched involuntarily. I forced my eyes to adjust to the light, blinking rapidly until shapes started to form. I was in a large space, maybe 50 feet square, with concrete walls stained with water damage and what might have been old blood. Industrial lights hung from chains attached to a ceiling 20 feet up. 3 men stood in front of me, silhouettes backlit by the harsh fluorescent glow. The one in the middle stepped forward, and I finally got a clear look at him. Tall, maybe 6'2", with a shaved head and a scar that ran from his left ear to the corner of his mouth. He wore tactical pants and a black t-shirt that showed arms covered in tattoos. Cartel Inc., the kind that tells a story of violence and loyalty to men who trade in suffering. "Anatoly Petrov," he said, and my blood went cold. Not because he knew my name, but because he used my real name. Not the persona, not the character I'd built for the cameras, but the name I'd left behind 20 years ago when I disappeared from Russia. "You're a hard man to find. Have you ever heard your past call out to you in a voice you'd hope never to hear again? Within the next few minutes, you'll learn exactly what I've been running from all these years." I said nothing. In situations like this, silence is often your best weapon. Let them talk, let them reveal information, let them make mistakes. The scared man talks, begs, pleads. The dangerous man waits and watches. Scarface smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Not going to ask where you are? Not going to demand we let you go?" I expected more from a legend. "Legends are just stories people tell," I said, my voice rougher than I'd expected. My throat was dry, possibly from dehydration, possibly from whatever they'd used to knock me out. "I'm just a man who lifts weights." "No," he said, crouching down to my eye level. "You're much more than that. You're the Ghost of Magadan, the butcher of the White Wolf Brigade, the man who walked away from Dmitry Volkov and lived to tell about it. Except you didn't tell about it, did you? You ran. Changed your name. Changed your life. Pretended to be a simple gym enthusiast making videos for children on the internet." My heart was hammering now, but I kept my face neutral. Magadan. I hadn't heard that name in 2 decades. The labor camp on Russia's eastern edge, where the government sent the men too dangerous or too inconvenient to kill outright. Where I'd spent 4 years of my life, from age 19 to 23, learning what humans are capable of when civilization's veneer is stripped away. The White Wolf Brigade was what we called ourselves, the group of prisoners who controlled the western cell blocks. We weren't a gang in the traditional sense. We were survivors bound by one simple rule. We protected each other, and we made the guards fear us more than we feared them. I'd done things in Magadan that still haunted my dreams, things that made me understand why hell is depicted with fire and screaming. Not because of the pain inflicted, but because of how easily that pain comes, how quickly you stop seeing other people as human when your own humanity is being slowly ground away. And Dmitry Volkov. God, I hadn't thought about that name in years. Dmitry had been the real power in Magadan, the man who ran operations from inside the camp with tentacles that reached all the way to Moscow. He'd taken me under his wing, saw something in me that he thought he could use. For 3 years, I was his enforcer, his weapon, his favorite instrument of control. Until I wasn't. "Dmitry sends his regards," Scarface continued, standing up and pulling out a cigarette. He lit it slowly, deliberately, letting the tension build. "He's been looking for you for a very long time. Wants to settle some old business before he dies. Cancer, you see. The doctors give him maybe 6 months. He wants to tie up loose ends." "I have no business with Dmitry Volkov," I said. "That life is dead. That's where you're wrong, my friend. When you stole from him, when you took what belonged to him and disappeared into the night like a coward, you created a debt. And debts don't die just because you wish them to. They compound, they grow, they metastasize like the tumors eating through Dimitri's lungs right now. I remembered that night. November 17th, 2004. The temperature had dropped to -35°C, cold enough that exposed skin would freeze in minutes. We had a shipment coming in, contraband that Dimitri had arranged through his contacts on the outside. Cigarettes, vodka, medical supplies, things that were worth more than gold inside Magadan. But hidden in that shipment was something else, something Dimitri hadn't told anyone about. $3 million American in unmarked bills, payment for services rendered to certain individuals in the Kremlin who needed problems solved quietly. I'd found out about the money by accident, overheard a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. And in that moment, I'd made a decision that would define the rest of my life. I took the money, walked out through a supply tunnel that led to the maintenance shed outside the prison walls, and disappeared into the Siberian night with nothing but the clothes on my back and enough cash to start over somewhere far away. It had taken me 3 weeks to reach Vladivostok, traveling only at night, stealing food and supplies, nearly freezing to death twice. From there, I'd bought passage on a cargo ship heading to South Korea, then slowly made my way through Asia and eventually to Europe. I'd spent years looking over my shoulder, waiting for Dimitri's reach to find me, but eventually, I'd convinced myself I was free. I should have known better. Men like Dmitry Volkov don't forget, and they never forgive. What does he want? I asked because there was no point in pretending anymore. The money, of course. $3 million, plus 20 years of interest. Call it $10 million total. You have 72 hours to arrange payment. I almost laughed. The absurdity of it was too much. I don't have $10 million. I don't have $1 million. That money's been gone for years. Scarface took a long drag from his cigarette, then exhaled slowly. Then you have a problem. Because if payment isn't received, Dimitri has instructed us to make an example of you. A very public, very painful example. He wants the world to know what happens to men who steal from him. Do you know what it feels like to realize the past you've been running from has finally caught up? Soon, you'll understand the choice I had to make. There's another option, one of the other men said. This one was shorter, stockier, with the kind of muscle that comes from hard labor rather than gym training. Dimitri mentioned you could work off the debt. Work it off how? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. You have certain skills, Scarface said. Skills that are still valuable. There are people who need to be convinced. Others who need to disappear. You do this for Dimitri, handle 5 jobs, and the debt is cleared. You walk away free, no more looking over your shoulder, no more running. You mean murder, I said flatly. You want me to kill people. We want you to be who you really are, Scarface corrected. Stop playing pretend with your little videos and your gym pranks. Stop hiding behind this false identity you've built. Embrace what you were born to be. The terrible thing was, part of me understood what he meant. There's a darkness in me, has been since I was young. A capacity for violence that goes beyond normal self-defense. In Magadan, I'd learned to channel it, to use it, to let it out in controlled bursts that kept me alive and made me feared. After I escaped, I tried to bury it under discipline and routine, to exhaust it through training until all that remained was the shell of a man pretending to be civilized. But it never really goes away, does it? The darkness. It just waits, patient and hungry, for circumstances to call it back to the surface. And if I refuse? I asked, though I knew this question was pointless too. Then we'll start with your friends, Scarface said casually. That gym owner in Texas who lets you film there, what's his name? Marcus. We'll visit him. Then maybe that young trainer you've been mentoring in Florida, the kid with the deadlift videos. We'll work through your entire social circle until either you comply or there's nobody left. Your choice. Rage flared through me again. Hot and immediate. Threatening me was one thing. I'd accepted long ago that my choices had consequences, that eventually, I'd have to pay for what I'd done. But bringing innocent people into this, people who had nothing to do with my past, people who'd shown me nothing but kindness and friendship, that was crossing a line that even in Magadan, even in the worst of times, we'd never crossed. You see it now, don't you? Scarface said, reading my expression. You see that you have no choice. You never did. Men like us, men forged in fire and blood, we don't get to retire. We don't get to just walk away and pretend we're normal. The universe doesn't work that way. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that people could change and redemption was possible. But the words stuck in my throat because I wasn't sure I believed them myself anymore. How many nights had I lain awake, unable to sleep, haunted by the faces of the men I'd hurt in Magadan? How many times had I looked at my hands, these instruments I'd trained to lift and build and create, and remembered what they'd done when survival demanded it? I need time to think, I said finally. You have 12 hours, Scarface replied. We'll move you to a more comfortable location, give you some food and water. But understand this clearly, every minute you waste thinking is a minute closer to someone you care about dying. Dmitri is not a patient man, and his time is running out. He wants this settled before he meets whatever judgment awaits him. They cut the zip ties from my wrists, and sensation flooded back into my hands with agonizing intensity. I bit back a groan, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing my pain. Two of them hauled me to my feet, and my legs nearly buckled. How long had I been sitting in that position? Long enough for the damage to be significant. They half-walked, half-dragged me through a metal door and down a corridor that smelled like industrial cleaning products and decay. We emerged into what looked like an old office, probably from when this building had been a legitimate business. There was a cot in the corner, a table with a chair, and a small bathroom with a sink and toilet visible through an open door. Basic, but compared to where I'd been, it looked like luxury. Food and water are on the table, Scarface said. Rest, think, decide. We'll be back before dawn. They left, and I heard the heavy clunk of a lock engaging from the outside. I was still a prisoner, just in a slightly better cell. I stumbled to the sink and ran cold water over my wrists, watching the blood wash away to reveal deep cuts where the zip ties had been. They'd scar, add to the collection of marks that mapped my life across my body like a violent autobiography. I drank directly from the tap, the water tasting of rust and chemicals but better than anything I'd had in hours. Then I sat at the table and stared at the food they'd left. Bread, cheese, some kind of processed meat, an apple that had seen better days. Prison food, really. The kind of meal that keeps you alive without making you grateful for it. I ate mechanically, forcing myself to consume calories because I'd need strength for whatever came next. And I thought about the impossible choice they'd given me. $10 million I didn't have, or become a murderer again. Return to the life I'd spent 20 years trying to escape, or watch innocent people die because of my past. There had to be another way, some third option I wasn't seeing. But as the hours crept by and dawn approached, that third option remained frustratingly elusive. Have you ever felt trapped between two versions of yourself, knowing that choosing one means killing the other? In just a moment, you'll see which version of me survived that night. I lay down on the cot, but sleep was impossible. My mind wouldn't stop racing, replaying every decision that had led me to this moment. The truth is, I'd been lying to myself for 2 decades. I'd convinced myself that I'd escaped, that I'd built a new life, that the man I was in Magadan had died in that frozen wasteland. But you can't kill parts of yourself just by wishing them dead. They hibernate, waiting for the right conditions to wake up. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd built an entire persona around being underestimated, around looking ordinary while being extraordinary. The old man in the gym who surprises everyone with his strength. But that was just another mask, wasn't it? Another lie layered on top of all the others. The real surprise wasn't my strength. It was that someone with my past could pretend to be harmless for so long. I thought about Marcus, the gym owner in Austin. Good man, father of 3, who'd let me film in his facility when nobody else would take a chance on some random foreigner with a strange accent and stranger ideas about content. He'd treated me like family, invited me to barbecues, introduced me to his kids. What would Dimitri's men do to him? Would they make it quick, or would they take their time to send a message? And Danny, the 22-year-old kid in Miami who reminded me so much of myself at that age. Hungry, driven, willing to sacrifice everything for strength. I've been mentoring him for 8 months, teaching him not just about lifting but about discipline, about the mental game, about how to turn pain into power. He looked up to me, called me uncle. What would his last thoughts be when they came for him? Would he understand why, or would he die confused and betrayed? The rage that had been simmering inside me since I woke up in the darkness started to shift, transforming into something colder and more focused. This was the problem with men like Dmitry Volkov. They thought everyone operated by the same rules they did. They thought fear and threats were the ultimate weapons. But they'd forgotten something important about men forged in places like Magadan. We learned how to turn fear into fuel. I sat up on the cot and began to assess my situation systematically. I was in a warehouse, probably industrial district, definitely Monterrey based on what Scarface had said. The walls were concrete, solid, no windows in this room. One door, metal, locked from the outside. 3 captors that I'd seen, possibly more. They were armed, I wasn't. They were organized, connected to serious criminal infrastructure. And they had 12 hours head start on researching my current life, which meant they knew where my friends were, probably had people watching them already. On paper it looked hopeless. But paper doesn't account for the human element. It doesn't account for what happens when a man decides he's willing to pay any price for the people he loves. I stood and began to move, slowly at first, testing my body. My shoulders ached, my wrists throbbed, but nothing was broken. I'd been hurt worse. Much worse. I started with basic movements, joint rotations, gentle stretches. Blood flow is everything. Movement is medicine. I'd learned this in the labor camps, where staying mobile meant staying alive through the brutal winters. As I moved, I let my mind work through scenarios. Direct confrontation was out. 3 armed men, probably more, with military or cartel training. I was strong, but strength alone doesn't stop bullets. I needed to be smart. I needed to find leverage, create opportunities, exploit weaknesses. The bathroom. I walked in and examined it carefully. Old plumbing, probably original to the building. The toilet tank lid was ceramic, heavy, maybe 4 or 5 pounds. A weapon if I needed one. The mirror above the sink was held in place by 4 screws, not quite as useful but worth noting. Under the sink, the pipes were metal, old enough that the joints might be loose. I knelt down and tested the pipe that connected the sink to the wall. It had some give. With enough force, I could probably wrench it free. Jagged metal pipe, about 18 inches long. Better than nothing. I left it alone for now, didn't want to tip my hand too early, but I filed the information away. The table in the main room was particle board, cheap, but the legs were metal. If I could break it apart quietly, those legs could work as improvised weapons too. The chair was similar construction. Everything in this room had been chosen because it was disposable, forgettable. They'd underestimated something important. Everything can be a weapon if you're desperate enough. I continued moving, loosening up, getting blood flowing to every muscle group. Push-ups, squats, lunges. I counted reps in my head, used them to mark time, to stay focused. 100 push-ups. 200. 300. The burn in my chest and arms felt good, familiar, grounding. This was my meditation, my prayer. Every rep was a declaration. I'm still here, I'm still strong, I'm not done yet. As I trained, I thought about Dmitry. 20 years ago, he'd been in his mid-40s, already showing signs of the hard life he'd led. Chain smoker, heavy drinker, the kind of stress that ages you in dog years. If he had terminal cancer now, if he was truly dying, that changed the calculation. Dying men become unpredictable. They stop caring about consequences because they won't be around to face them. They settle scores and burn bridges because legacy becomes more important than survival. That made him more dangerous, but it also made him vulnerable. A man facing death starts making mistakes, gets emotional, lets pride override strategy. If I could somehow get to him directly, maybe I could negotiate. But that seemed unlikely. Men like Dmitry surrounded themselves with layers of protection, especially when they were weak. No, my best bet was to deal with the immediate threat. Scarface and his men. If I could escape, if I could disappear again, maybe I could buy enough time to move my friends to safety, to go underground deeper than before. It would mean abandoning everything I'd built, the YouTube channel, the connections, the small taste of normalcy I'd found. But it would keep everyone alive. The alternative was unthinkable. Going back to killing, becoming Dmitry's attack dog, letting that darkness consume me completely. I'd worked too hard to bury that part of myself. I'd spent 20 years building walls around it, brick by brick, rep by rep, trying to become something better than the monster Magadan had created. But what if those walls were just an illusion? What if the monster was the truth, and everything else was the lie I told myself to sleep at night? Do you know what it's like to question everything you believe about who you are? You're about to find out what I discovered about myself that night. Hours passed. I trained, I planned, I waited. Eventually, I heard footsteps approaching. Multiple sets, same as before. The lock disengaged with a heavy click, and the door swung open. Scarface entered first, followed by the stocky one from before. The third man stayed in the doorway, hand resting on a pistol holstered at his hip. "Time's up," Scarface said. "What's your decision?" I stood in the center of the room, hands loose at my sides, body language neutral. "I need more information before I decide anything. You want me to work off this debt. What exactly are these 5 jobs? Who are the targets?" Scarface smiled. "Smart. I told Dimitri you'd try to negotiate. The first target is a federal prosecutor in Tijuana. He's been causing problems for our organization, targeting our financial networks. The second is a journalist in Mexico City, writing stories about cartel operations that are attracting too much attention. The third is a rival operator in Guadalajara who's been trying to move into our territory. The fourth is a corrupt politician in Juarez who's outlived his usefulness. And the fifth..." He paused for effect. "The fifth is up to you. There's someone in your life who knows too much about who you really are. Someone from your past. We'll let you choose who it is, give you some control over the situation." My blood went cold. "You want me to kill someone from my past? Someone who knows about Magadan? That's the idea. Clean up loose ends. Prove your loyalty. Then you walk away free, and we never bother you again." I processed this information quickly. 4 professionals, 1 personal. They were testing me, seeing if I'd actually go through with it. But more than that, they were trying to break me psychologically. Making me choose which ghost from my past to eliminate was about power, about forcing me to fully embrace the old life. And if I complete these jobs, Dimitri actually lets me go? You understand why that's hard to believe. You think we'd go through all this trouble just to kill you afterward? Scarface shrugged. "Dimitri's dying. He doesn't care about revenge anymore. Not really. He cares about order, about making sure people understand that debts get paid. You pay yours, the books are balanced, everyone moves on. How do I know you won't just kill me after the first job? Or use this as leverage to keep me working indefinitely?" "You don't," Scarface admitted. "But consider the alternative. We kill everyone you care about, then we kill you. Slowly. Dimitri wants it filmed, wants it sent to everyone in the organization as a lesson. Is that really better than taking a chance that we'll honor our word?" He had a point, which infuriated me. I was being backed into a corner, given a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. But even in corners, even with your back against the wall, there are always options. You just have to be willing to see them. "I want 48 hours to prepare," I said. "If I'm going to do this, I need time to research the targets, to plan properly. Going in blind gets us all killed." 12 hours, Scarface countered. "We start with the prosecutor tomorrow night." 24 then. Compromise. I need at least that long to get my head right, to access resources, to make this work. He considered this, then nodded slowly. 24 hours. But understand this clearly. You try to run, you try to contact anyone, you do anything except prepare for this job, and we start eliminating your friends. 1 every hour until you comply. Are we clear?" "Crystal," I said. "Good." He pulled out a smartphone and tossed it to me. I caught it reflexively. Burner phone. Untraceable. Everything you need to know about the prosecutor is already loaded on there. Study it. We'll be watching, but you'll have some freedom to move around. Get whatever equipment you need. Consider it a test of faith. They left, and this time they didn't lock the door. I stood there for a long moment, holding the phone, feeling its weight in my hand. This was the moment. The decision point. I could walk out that door, try to run, try to save everyone through escape. Or I could play along, buy time, look for an opening to turn the situation around. I opened the phone and pulled up the files on the prosecutor. His name was Alejandro Mendoza, 43 years old, married with 2 kids. Harvard law degree, 15 years in the Mexican justice system. By all accounts, he was one of the good ones. Honest, dedicated, actually trying to make a difference in a system corroded by corruption. His current case involved tracking cartel money laundering through legitimate businesses in Tijuana and San Diego. There were photos of his house, his route to work, his security detail. Someone had done extensive surveillance. They knew his patterns, his vulnerabilities, the exact moments when he'd be most exposed. They'd even identified the weak points in his security. The morning coffee stop he made 3 times a week at a cafe near the courthouse, the evening jogs through a park near his home. As I reviewed the information, I felt something shift inside me. A cold calculation taking over, the part of my brain that had kept me alive in Magadan activating despite my best efforts to keep it dormant. I was analyzing vulnerabilities, planning approaches, considering methods. And I hated myself for how naturally it came, how easily I slipped back into that mindset. Have you ever felt yourself becoming someone you swore you'd never be again? Soon, you'll understand the price of survival. I walked out of the room and found myself in the warehouse proper. It was massive, maybe 200 feet by 300 feet, with a ceiling that stretched up into shadows. Old machinery sat abandoned in corners, covered with tarps and dust. Loading docks lined one wall, their rolling doors rusted and partially open to let in the pale gray light of early morning. 2 men watched me from across the space. Not Scarface or his immediate crew, but guards. They were trying to look casual, but their hands were never far from weapons. The message was clear: you're not a prisoner anymore, but you're not free either. This was a halfway state, a trial period to see if I'd comply. I walked toward one of the loading docks, feeling their eyes track my movement. The air outside was cool, desert air with that particular quality of Mexican mornings. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the mountains in the distance with streaks of orange and pink. Beautiful, really. The kind of sunrise that makes you grateful to be alive. Unless you're contemplating murder. I sat on the edge of the loading dock, legs dangling over the side, and let myself think. Really think, without the pressure of immediate danger clouding my judgment. Here's what I knew. Dmitry Volkov wanted me to kill 5 people to clear a debt from 20 years ago. 4 of those people were connected to cartel operations, criminals themselves in most cases, though the prosecutor and journalist complicated that moral calculus. The 5th was someone from my past. But who from my past even knew about Magadan? I'd been so careful, covered my tracks so thoroughly. Unless someone had talked. Someone who'd been in the camp with me, someone who'd survived and might have kept tabs on me over the years. There was Viktor Sokolov, my cellmate for 2 years. Tough old bastard who'd taught me half of what I knew about fighting. Last I'd heard, he'd been released in 2006, but that was 18 years ago. No idea if he was even alive. Then there was Alexei Volkov, Dmitry's nephew, who'd worked as a guard captain in the camp. We'd had an understanding, an arrangement that benefited both of us. He turned a blind eye to certain activities, and I made sure the cell block stayed quiet. When I escaped, I'd made sure not to implicate him. Maybe he felt differently about that. And there was Oksana. I didn't like thinking about her, tried not to most days. She'd been a nurse at the camp medical facility, smuggled in to provide health care because even the Russian government understood you couldn't work prisoners to death without at least minimal medical care. We'd had something. Not quite love. You can't have real love in a place like that, but more than just convenience. She'd helped me get information about the money shipment, probably suspected what I was planning even if I never told her directly. The thought of Dmitry wanting me to kill Oksana made my stomach turn, but it would be exactly his style. Make me eliminate the one person from that time who'd shown me genuine kindness. Break me completely before letting me go. If she was even still alive. 20 years is a long time, and people who worked in Magadan didn't tend to have long, healthy lives afterward. I pulled out the burner phone and scrolled through the other files. The second target, the journalist, was named Patricia Delgado, 38 years old, award-winning investigative reporter who'd been covering cartel operations for a decade. She'd survived 2 assassination attempts already, which meant she was smart, careful, and determined. Her current series was focused on the financial networks that moved cartel money into legitimate businesses throughout North America. The third target was another cartel operator, which somehow felt cleaner in my mind. Marcos Gutierrez, 49, with a rap sheet that included murder, trafficking, and enough violence to fill a book. He was exactly the kind of predator who deserved what was coming. Not that it made me feel better about potentially being the one to deliver it. The fourth was the politician, Reynaldo Ortiz. On paper, he looked clean. City councilman in Juarez, family man, community leader. But according to the files, he'd been taking cartel money for years, providing cover for operations, blocking investigations. And now apparently, he'd outlived his usefulness or was threatening to talk. 4 lives. For people who would die if I didn't act, or dozens of people I cared about who would die if I refused. The math was brutal and simple. But math doesn't account for the weight of taking a life, the way it changes you, the way it never really leaves you even when you think you've moved past it. I thought about all the videos I'd made, all the content about discipline and strength and overcoming obstacles. What would my audience think if they knew the truth? That their inspirational old man who pranked bodybuilders and lifted heavy weight had been a killer in another life? That he was considering becoming one again? The cognitive dissonance was almost funny. Almost. "You look troubled," a voice said behind me. I turned to see a woman standing in the warehouse, someone I hadn't seen before. She was maybe 50, with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing a simple black dress that somehow managed to look both elegant and threatening. Her eyes were ice blue, startling against her olive skin. "And you are?" I asked. "Someone who's been watching you for a long time," she said, walking closer. Her movements were precise, controlled, like a dancer or a martial artist. "My name is Elena Volkov, Dimitri's sister." Of course. I should have known Dimitri wouldn't trust this operation entirely to hired guns. Family would want to oversee it personally, make sure the message was delivered exactly right. "I didn't know Dimitri had a sister," I said carefully. "He has 3, actually. But I'm the only one who understood him, who shared his vision for what we could build." She sat down next to me on the loading dock, close enough that I could smell her perfume. "Something expensive. European. You hurt him deeply when you stole from us, Anatoly. Not because of the money, though that hurt too, but because he trusted you, saw you as a son in some ways. And you betrayed that trust." "I was a prisoner," I said. "Not his son. Not his anything. I was property, a tool he used until I found a way out." "Is that how you rationalize it?" Elena asked, and there was genuine curiosity in her voice. "You take millions of dollars that didn't belong to you, money that represented years of planning and risk, and you tell yourself it's justified because you were a prisoner? Would you steal from anyone, or just from us?" The question stung because it was valid. I'd never thought of myself as a thief. Not really. I'd taken what I needed to escape, to survive. But Elena was right, wasn't she? The money wasn't mine. I'd stolen it. That it was cartel money, that it came from criminal activity, did that make it okay? Or was I just another thief who'd gotten lucky? "I wanted to be free," I said simply. "The money was the only way." "Freedom isn't free," Elena replied. "It has a cost always. You bought yours with Dimitri's money. Now he's asking you to pay him back. Is that really so unreasonable? He's asking me to kill people. He's asking you to do what you're good at, what you spent years perfecting in Magadan. You act like you're some reformed soul, like you've left violence behind. But we both know that's not true. We've been watching you, Anatoly. We've seen the way you move, the way you assess every room you enter, the way your hands instinctively position themselves when you sense threat. You're not a civilian pretending to be dangerous. You're a dangerous man pretending to be civilized." Her words hit harder than I wanted to admit because they echoed thoughts I'd had myself. How much of my new life was real, and how much was just elaborate pretense? Do you ever wonder if the person you're trying to become is fighting a losing battle against who you really are? In the next few minutes, you'll see which version wins. "Tell me about the 5th target," I said, changing the subject. "Who from my past does Dimitri want dead?" Elena smiled, and it was not a warm expression. That depends on which path you choose. If you complete the first 4 jobs successfully, if you prove yourself, then the 5th is your choice. Pick anyone from your Magadan days who might cause problems. Or pick no one, if you can convince us there's no risk. But if I refuse the first 4 jobs? Then the 5th target becomes automatic. And it's someone you care about very much. She pulled out her own phone and showed me a photo. My heart stopped. It was Oksana. 20 years older, gray hair, lines around her eyes, but unmistakably her. She was sitting at an outdoor cafe, smiling at something off camera. Alive. Still alive after all this time. She runs a clinic in Vladivostok now, Elena said. Small operation. Helps poor families who can't afford medical care. Very noble. Very vulnerable. No security, no protection, completely exposed. It would take maybe 5 minutes to eliminate her, and nobody would even investigate properly. You're a monster, I said, my voice flat and cold. No, Elena corrected. I'm practical. Dmitri wanted leverage that would actually work on you. Everything else in your life is surface level, easily replaced. But her, she's the one person from your real life, your true life, that you actually cared about. She's the weight that will tip the scales. I stared at the photo, memories flooding back. Oksana treating my injuries after fights, her hands gentle despite the rough environment. Oksana smuggling me extra rations when I was sick with fever. Oksana's smile, rare and precious in that place of constant suffering. We'd talked about escaping together, about finding a life beyond the barbed wire and guard towers. But in the end, I'd left her behind. Couldn't risk bringing her, couldn't slow myself down with another person to protect. I told myself it was for her own safety. That my escape would be dangerous enough for one person, impossible for 2. But the truth was simpler and more painful. I'd been a coward. I'd chosen my freedom over her safety, over any chance we might have had together. And now Dmitri was using that old guilt, that old regret, as the ultimate leverage. You have a choice, Elena said, standing up and smoothing her dress. Complete the jobs, pay your debt, and everyone lives. Walk away, and we start with Oksana, then work through everyone else you've ever shown kindness to. Your choice. Anatoly. But choose quickly. My brother doesn't have much time left, and his patience is wearing thin. She walked away, leaving me alone with the photo on the phone screen and the weight of impossible decisions crushing down on my shoulders. I sat there for hours as the sun climbed higher and the temperature rose. The guards watched me but didn't interfere. Cars passed by occasionally on the road beyond the warehouse fence, normal people living normal lives, completely unaware of the life and death calculations happening just a few hundred feet away. My mind kept circling back to the same questions. Was there any scenario where everyone survived? Could I complete these jobs and live with myself afterward? Could I refuse and live with the consequences? And underneath all of it, the question that terrified me most, was Elena right? Was I just a killer pretending to be something else? And was this situation simply revealing my true nature? I thought about all the years I'd spent building discipline, creating routines, imposing order on chaos. Wake up at 5 a.m. Train for 2 hours. Eat clean. Focus on form. Master the basics. I told myself these habits were transforming me, making me better, more than what I'd been in Magadan. But maybe discipline wasn't about transformation at all. Maybe it was just about control. Keeping the monster leashed, giving it an outlet through iron and effort instead of blood and violence. The monster was still there, still hungry, still waiting. I'd just gotten better at managing it. The phone buzzed in my hand. A message. Decision time. Yes or no. My thumb hovered over the keypad. One word would commit me to a path I'd spent 20 years trying to avoid. One word would damn me back to the life I'd escaped. But the alternative was watching everyone I cared about die, knowing I could have prevented it. There had to be another way. There had to be. And then it hit me. A third option. So obvious I almost laughed at having missed it for so long. If Dmitry Volkov wanted these people dead, if he was using me as his instrument, what did that say about his current operational capacity? He was dying, yes, but more than that, he must be weak. Why else outsource to someone he hadn't seen in 20 years? Why not use his current people, his established network. Unless that network was compromised. Unless he needed someone outside his organization, someone with skills but no current connection to his operations. Someone expendable. I was being used, yes. But I could use that. If I played along, if I pretended to comply, I could get inside their operation. Learn their structure, their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities. And then, when they least expected it, I could dismantle it from within. It was dangerous. Probably suicidal. The odds of success were microscopic. But it was something. It was a path that didn't require me to either kill innocent people or watch everyone I loved die. I typed one word. Yes. The response came immediately. Smart choice. Tomorrow night, 10 p.m. You'll receive coordinates. Be ready. I stood up, feeling something crystallize inside me. A resolve, cold and hard as Siberian iron. I was going to play their game, but by my rules. I was going to get inside their operation, and I was going to burn it to the ground. Dmitry Volkov wanted the Ghost of Magadan? Fine. He was going to get exactly that, but not in the way he expected. The guards watched as I walked back into the warehouse, but they didn't stop me. Why would they? As far as they knew, I'd accepted the deal, committed to the path. They had no idea that in accepting, I'd declared war. I spent the rest of that day preparing. Not for the prosecutor's assassination, but for something much bigger. I used the burner phone to access encrypted email accounts I'd set up years ago, fail-safes I'd hoped never to use. I sent carefully worded messages to contacts I hadn't spoken to in a decade, calling in old favors, activating dormant networks. In Magadan, I'd learned something valuable. The strongest weapon isn't always the biggest or the most obvious. Sometimes it's the smallest piece, the one everyone overlooks, that brings the whole structure crashing down. Dmitry had built an organization on fear and violence, on the assumption that people would do anything to survive. But he'd forgotten that some people, when pushed far enough, stop caring about survival. They start caring about something bigger. Purpose. Justice. Revenge. By the time night fell again, I'd laid the groundwork for what came next. It wasn't much, just threads and possibilities, but it was a start. The guards brought me food, and I ate it without tasting. They asked if I needed anything, and I told them I was fine. They believed me because they wanted to, because it made their job easier. That night, I barely slept. My mind was too active, running through scenarios, calculating probabilities, preparing for 1,000 possible outcomes. When I did drift off, I dreamed of Magadan. The cold, the darkness, the sound of men's voices echoing off concrete walls. But for the first time in years, those dreams didn't feel like nightmares. They felt like memories, resources I could draw on. The next day passed in a blur of preparation and planning. I trained, keeping my body sharp. I studied the files on the prosecutor again, not looking for ways to kill him but for patterns in the surveillance, weaknesses in the operation itself. I memorized faces, license plates, locations. Every piece of information was a potential weapon. Evening came. The phone buzzed. 1 hour. Van will pick you up outside. Black Econoline, license plate RKL 4782. Be ready. I walked outside and waited. The sun was setting again, that same beautiful light painting the mountains, indifferent to human suffering and struggle. The van arrived exactly on time. Scarface was driving, with the stocky one in the passenger seat. The back was empty except for a duffel bag. "Get in," Scarface said. I climbed in, and we pulled away from the warehouse. The duffel bag contained exactly what I'd expected. Clothes, a silenced pistol, ammunition, gloves, a fake ID, and a burner phone with the target's current location pulled up on GPS. "The prosecutor is at his mistress's apartment," Scarface said from the front seat, watching me in the rear-view mirror. "Thinks nobody knows about her, but we've been tracking him for months. He goes there every Thursday night, tells his wife he's working late. Security is minimal. One bodyguard in the lobby, but he's on our payroll. You'll have a clean window from 10:47 to 11:15. That's when the bodyguard takes his smoke break in the alley behind the building." I examined the pistol. Glock 19. Reliable. Well-maintained. The suppressor was professional grade, not the amateur stuff you see in movies. Someone knew what they were doing. I checked the magazine, counted rounds, tested the action. All perfect. All ready. You've done this before, the stocky one observed. The way you handle the weapon. Muscle memory doesn't lie.
Magadan taught me many things, I said neutrally.
Good. Then this should be easy for you. Scarface turned down a street that led into a more upscale neighborhood. We'll drop you 2 blocks away.
You walk in, do the job, walk out.
We'll be waiting at the extraction point. Whole thing should take 15 minutes max. And if something goes wrong? I asked. Then you handle it. We're not backup. We're not support. We're just the ride. You're the weapon. Weapons don't need help doing what they're designed for. The van stopped at a corner. Through the window, I could see a modern apartment building, maybe 8 stories, glass and steel trying to look expensive in a city that had seen too much violence to be impressed by architecture.
Lights glowed in various windows. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that a killer was being delivered to their doorstep. Phone stays in the van, Scarface said.
You take the burner in the bag. It has 1 number programmed.
You call when it's done, we pick you up.
Simple. I nodded, gathered the duffel bag, and stepped out into the night. The door slammed behind me, and the van pulled away, leaving me alone on a Mexican street corner with a gun and a mission I had absolutely no intention of completing as planned. I walked slowly toward the apartment building, taking in every detail.
Security cameras on the corners, but old models, probably recording to a local DVR that could be accessed or destroyed.
The lobby had floor-to-ceiling windows, giving me a clear view inside. One guard, just like Scarface said, sitting behind a desk and looking bored. He checked his watch, then pulled out a pack of cigarettes. Right on schedule. The bodyguard stood up and walked toward a side door, disappearing from view. I had 28 minutes. I approached the building, but instead of going to the main entrance, I circled around to the alley Scarface had mentioned. Found the bodyguard leaning against the wall, smoking and scrolling through his phone. He didn't even look up as I approached.
You're early, he said in Spanish, not taking his eyes off the screen.
Supposed to wait for my signal. Change of plans, I replied, and before he could react, I had him in a chokehold. Not to kill, just to render unconscious. He struggled for maybe 5 seconds before going limp.
I lowered him to the ground gently, checked his pulse to make sure he was still alive, then zip-tied his hands behind his back and gagged him with his own tie. He'd wake up with a headache and some explaining to do, but he'd wake up. I took his access card and his radio, then entered the building through the service entrance. The interior hallway was empty, just fluorescent lights and the smell of industrial cleaning products. I found the stairs and started climbing. The prosecutor was in apartment 6C according to the intelligence. 6th floor. My heart was racing now, adrenaline flooding my system. This was the feeling I remembered from Magadan, the razor's edge between control and chaos. Every sense heightened, every muscle primed, the world narrowing to nothing but the mission and the moment. But this wasn't Magadan. And I wasn't that person anymore. Or was I? The ease with which I'd moved through this operation so far, the way my body remembered every technique, every tactic suggested otherwise. Maybe Elena was right. Maybe you can't escape what you are. You can only pretend until circumstances strip away the pretense. I reached the 6th floor and paused at the stairwell door, listening. Voices down the hall, a couple arguing about something mundane. A TV playing too loud through thin walls. Normal sounds of normal lives. I waited until the couple went into their apartment and the hallway fell quiet. Apartment 6C was at the end of the hall. I approached silently, years of training making my footsteps nearly soundless on the cheap carpet. At the door, I paused again, listening. Music inside, something classical. Vivaldi, maybe. And voices, 2 people talking, though I couldn't make out the words.
This was the moment. In that duffel bag was a pistol that would turn me back into what I'd been. One squeeze of the trigger, and Alejandro Mendoza would die. His children would grow up without a father. His wife would mourn. And I would be exactly what Dmitry Volkov wanted me to be. A killer who could be controlled through threats and leverage. Or I could do something else. Something riskier, something that would probably get me killed, but something that might actually solve this problem instead of just delaying it. I knocked on the door. The music stopped. Footsteps approached. Who is it?
A woman's voice. Young. Cautious.
Building security, I said in Spanish, keeping my accent neutral.
We need to speak with Senor Mendoza about a situation in the parking garage.
Silence for a moment, then the sound of a chain sliding.
The door opened a crack, and a woman's face appeared. Late 20s, dark hair, wearing a silk robe.
The mistress. Behind her, I could see into the apartment. Modern, minimalist, expensive. And there, standing by the window with a glass of wine, was Alejandro Mendoza himself. He looked exactly like his photos. Fit, well-dressed even in casual clothes, the kind of man who carried authority naturally. But there was something else too, something the surveillance photos hadn't captured. Exhaustion. The kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from fighting battles you know you can't win.
There's no situation in the parking garage, Mendoza said, walking toward the door.
His hand moved toward his waistband, probably reaching for a weapon. Smart man. Who are you really? Someone who needs to talk to you, I said. And we don't have much time. In approximately 22 minutes, a van is going to arrive at the extraction point 2 blocks from here. When I don't show up, men are going to come looking. Men who will kill you, kill her, and kill anyone else who gets in their way. So I suggest you let me in so we can figure out how to keep everyone alive. His eyes narrowed, calculating. I could see him weighing options, assessing risk. Then he made a decision. Maria, go into the bedroom. Lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you.
The woman started to protest, but he cut her off with a look.
She disappeared into the back of the apartment. I heard a door close, a lock engage. Mendoza stepped back and opened the door fully. You have 2 minutes to convince me not to shoot you. I entered the apartment, set the duffel bag down, and raised my hands to show I wasn't holding a weapon. My name is Anatoly Petrov. I was sent here tonight to kill you by the Volkov organization. They're using me as a weapon because I owe them a debt from 20 years ago. But I'm not going to kill you. Instead, I'm going to tell you everything I know about their operation, and you're going to use that information to bring them down. In exchange, you're going to help me disappear before they realize what happened. Mendoza pulled a pistol from his waistband and pointed it at my chest. Why should I believe anything you just said? You break into my private residence, threaten me, and now you want me to trust you. Because in 20 minutes, if I don't call in confirmation of your death, they're going to send a cleanup crew. That crew will kill you regardless of whether I'm here or not. So your options are, shoot me now and die in 20 minutes, or listen to what I have to say and maybe we both survive this. He studied me for a long moment, then lowered the gun slightly. Talk. Fast. I told him everything. About Dmitry Volkov, about Magadan, about the debt and the leverage and the 5 targets. I gave him names, dates, locations. Everything I'd learned from the surveillance files, everything I'd pieced together about the organization structure. I spoke quickly but precisely, knowing every second counted. Mendoza listened without interrupting, his prosecutor's mind cataloging every detail. When I finished, he was silent for a moment, then said, You're telling me that Dmitry Volkov, the man we've been trying to build a case against for 15 years, is dying and desperate enough to outsource wet work to a has-been from a Siberian labor camp? That's exactly what I'm telling you. And it means he's vulnerable. His organization is compromised somehow, or he wouldn't need me. This is your chance to strike while he's weak. Or it's an elaborate trap to feed me false information and discredit my investigation. Possibly. But you're smart enough to verify what I'm telling you. Check the names I gave you. Cross-reference the operations. You'll see I'm telling the truth. He walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Even if everything you're saying is accurate, what makes you think I can help you disappear? I'm a prosecutor, not a CIA handler. I don't have the resources to hide someone from a cartel organization. But you have connections. People who owe you favors. And more importantly, you have motivation. If I disappear and Volkov thinks I betrayed him, he'll focus his resources on finding me. That takes pressure off you, gives you breathing room to build your case. While painting a target on your back. I've had a target on my back for 20 years. At least this way, it means something. Mendoza turned back to face me. Why are you doing this? Really? You could have killed me, completed your mission, bought yourself more time. Why betray Volkov now? It was a fair question, one I'd been asking myself since I made the decision. Because I'm tired of running from who I was. I've spent 2 decades trying to become someone better, someone clean. But you can't build a new life on a foundation of corpses. Eventually, the dead drag you back down. So maybe instead of running from my past, I need to face it head-on. End it properly, whatever the cost. Have you ever reached a point where you realize the only way forward is through the fire that's been chasing you? You're about to see what happens when a man stops running. Mendoza checked his watch. 16 minutes until your extraction. If we're doing this, we need to move now. I'm going to make some calls. Get some people here who can help. But you need to give me something concrete, something I can verify immediately to prove you're telling the truth. I thought for a moment, then said, the Volkov organization moves money through a trucking company called Transmexico Logistica. They have a facility in Apodaca, about 40 minutes from here. Tonight, at 1 a.m., there's a shipment arriving from Colombia. $30 million in cash, hidden in furniture shipments. The money's being moved because of your investigation. They're shifting assets to safer locations. You verify that shipment exists, you'll know I'm legitimate. Mendoza pulled out his phone and made a call. Spoke rapidly in Spanish to someone on the other end, too fast for me to catch every word. He gave the information about Transmexico Logistica, asked for immediate surveillance. Then he hung up and looked at me. If you're lying, if this is some kind of setup, I will make it my life's mission to destroy you. Understand? I understand. But I'm not lying. He made another call, this one longer. When he finished, he said, I have people coming. Federal agents, ones I trust completely. They'll take you to a safe location while we verify your information. If it checks out, we'll discuss what happens next. If it doesn't... He left the threat unspoken. Fair enough. Now here's what's going to happen with your extraction. You're going to call your handlers in approximately 10 minutes. You're going to tell them the job is done, but there were complications. The bodyguard came back early, you had to neutralize him, and it's going to take longer to clean the scene than expected. Buy us another hour. They won't believe it. Then sell it better. You're a trained killer, yes? So act like one. Make them believe. He had a point. I'd been thinking like someone trying to escape the game, but I needed to think like someone still playing it. At least for a little while longer. The next 10 minutes passed in tense silence. Mendoza stayed by the window, watching the street. I sat on his couch, running through what I'd say, how I'd deliver it. The key to a good lie is believing it yourself, at least in the moment. I needed to sound frustrated, slightly rushed, but still professional. When the time came, I pulled out the burner phone and dialed the number. Scarface answered on the first ring. Status. It's done, I said, letting irritation creep into my voice. But we have a problem. The bodyguard came back early, interrupted the job. I had to neutralize him non-lethally to avoid complications. Now I need to stage the scene properly, make it look like a break-in gone wrong instead of a hit. Give me another hour. Silence on the other end. I could practically hear him thinking, weighing whether to believe me. We said 15 minutes, he finally responded. You're already over time. Then what do you want me to do? Leave it looking like a professional assassination? That brings heat. Heat brings investigations. Investigations lead back to you. I'm trying to do this right, not fast. More silence. Then, 1 hour. Not a minute more. And Anatoly? If you're playing games, remember what happens to the people you care about. I remember, I said and hung up. Mendoza nodded approval. Good. Convincing. Now we wait. 20 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Mendoza checked the peephole, then let in 3 people. 2 men and a woman, all wearing civilian clothes but moving with the precise efficiency of federal agents. They looked at me with the kind of suspicion I'd expect, hands near concealed weapons. This is him, the woman asked. She was maybe 40, with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too much violence to be shocked by anything. The defector? That's what he claims, Mendoza said. We're waiting on verification of his information.
One of the men's phones buzzed. He read the message, then looked up with surprise. The trucking company checks out.
Surveillance confirms increased activity at the Apodaca facility. Looks like they're preparing for a major shipment.
The woman's eyes narrowed.
Could still be a setup. Feed us real intel to gain trust, then use that trust to feed us false information later.
Possible, I agreed.
But I gave you actionable intelligence about tonight's operation. You can intercept that shipment if you move fast enough. 30 million in cash and whoever's transporting it. That's not something they'd sacrifice just to plant a mole. She considered this, then made a decision. Carlos, Miguel, take him to the safe house. Keep him locked down tight until we know more. I'll coordinate with Mendoza on the operation.
The two men moved toward me. One of them produced zip ties, and I offered my wrists without resistance.
No point fighting now, not when I just convinced them I was cooperating. They secured my hands, then led me toward the door.
Wait, Mendoza said.
He walked over and looked me in the eyes. If you're telling the truth, if you really are trying to make this right, then thank you.
My children will grow up with a father because of what you did tonight.
But if this is a lie, if any of my people get hurt because of information you provided, I will personally make sure you suffer in ways that make Magadan look merciful.
I understand, I said.
And I hope you catch them all. They led me out through the service entrance, avoiding the lobby cameras.
A black SUV was waiting in the alley.
They put me in the back seat, one agent on either side. The woman who'd been in the apartment climbed into the passenger seat, and a driver I hadn't seen before started the engine. We drove for maybe 40 minutes, taking a winding route that I suspected was designed to confuse my sense of direction. Eventually, we pulled up to what looked like a regular house in a regular neighborhood. Suburban, quiet, completely unremarkable. Perfect for hiding someone.
Inside, the house was surprisingly well equipped.
Reinforced doors, security cameras, probably safe rooms and escape routes I couldn't see. They took me to a room on the second floor, removed the zip ties, and locked me in. The room was basic but comfortable. Bed, chair, small bathroom attached. One window with bars on the inside. I sat on the bed and finally let myself process what had just happened. I'd betrayed Dmitry Volkov. Turned against the organization that had controlled my life for so long. Given information to the authorities that could potentially bring down an empire built on blood and fear. And in doing so, I'd painted the biggest possible target on my back. But I'd also saved Alejandro Mendoza's life. Prevented at least one death. Made a choice that aligned with who I wanted to be rather than who I'd been forced to become. That had to count for something.
The question now was, what happened next?
Even if the raid on Transmexico Logistica was successful, even if they managed to arrest key players in the Volkov organization, Dmitry himself was probably too insulated to touch directly. He'd know I betrayed him. He'd activate every resource he had to find me. And more importantly, he'd go after the people I cared about. Marcus in Austin, Danny in Miami, and Oksana in Vladivostok. All of them at risk because of what I'd just done. I needed to warn them, needed to get them to safety somehow. But I was locked in a federal safe house with no phone, no way to contact anyone.
I was trapped in a different kind of prison, one with comfortable furniture and good intentions, but a prison nonetheless.
Hours passed. I tried to sleep but couldn't. My mind kept running through scenarios, possibilities, calculating odds of survival. Not just for me, but for everyone I'd endangered by making this choice.
Around 3 a.m., the door opened.
The gray-haired woman entered, and her expression told me something significant had happened. The raid was successful, she said without preamble. We seized the cash, arrested 12 people including 2 of Volkov's top lieutenants. One of them is already talking, trying to cut a deal. Your information was accurate.
So you believe me now?
I'm getting there. But we have a problem. During the raid, one of the suspects managed to make a phone call before we could stop him. We intercepted it, but the damage is done.
Someone in the organization knows there was a leak.
They'll figure out it was you. My stomach dropped. How long do I have? Hours, maybe. Volkov will want to send a message. He'll go after anyone connected to you, anyone who might have helped you. We've already started reaching out to people in your life, offering protection.
There's someone in Russia, I said urgently.
Oksana Volkov. Well, that's not her real last name, I don't know what it is now. She runs a clinic in Vladivostok. Former nurse from Magadan. Dmitry explicitly threatened her as leverage. You need to warn her, get her to safety.
The woman pulled out a phone and made notes.
We'll try, but our reach into Russia is limited. I can contact some people, but I can't guarantee anything.
Then let me go.
Let me warn her myself. You're not going anywhere. You're our witness now, and potentially a major asset in bringing down the Volkov organization. We need you alive and accessible. Accessible to testify? I'm not getting on a witness stand. The moment I do that publicly, I'm dead within a week. We can protect you. Witness protection, new identity, the whole package. I almost laughed. You think witness protection stops people like Dmitry Volkov? He found me after 20 years of being extremely careful. Your program won't even slow him down. She sat down in the chair across from the bed. Then what do you suggest? Because from where I'm sitting, you've run out of options. You betrayed a major cartel organization. They will hunt you. The only question is whether you die alone and unprotected, or whether you help us destroy them first and take some of them down with you. She was right, and I hated it. I'd known this was likely from the moment I knocked on Mendoza's door instead of putting a bullet in his head. There was no clean way out of this situation. No path that led to safety and peace and a return to my YouTube channel and my quiet life of gym pranks and training videos. That life was over. The question was what replaced it. I want to talk to Mendoza, I said. Directly. If I'm going to help you, I need to know exactly what you're asking for and what you can actually deliver. I'll see what I can arrange. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, what you did tonight took courage. A different kind of courage than you probably used in Magadan, but courage nonetheless. Most people don't get a chance to choose who they want to be. You did, and you chose well. After she left, I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Chose well. Had I? Or had I just traded one form of slavery for another?
Instead of being Dmitry's weapon, I was now the government's witness.
Different master, same lack of freedom. But maybe that was too cynical. Maybe there was a difference between being used as an instrument of violence and being used as an instrument of justice. Maybe the ends did matter, not just the means. I must have finally fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the barred window and someone was knocking on the door. Different agent this time. Young guy who looked like he was fresh out of training. He brought breakfast on a tray. Eggs, toast, coffee. Prison food upgraded slightly. Mendoza's coming to see you this afternoon, he said. Until then, try to relax. Relax. Sure. No problem. I just betrayed one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the Western Hemisphere and put everyone I cared about in mortal danger. What was there to stress about? I ate mechanically, forcing down calories I didn't taste. Then I did what I always did when stress threatened to overwhelm me. I trained. Push-ups, squats, lunges. Used the chair for dips, the bed frame for rows. Counted reps, focused on form. Let the familiar burn in my muscles ground me in the present moment. This was meditation for me, had been since I was young. When the world becomes too complex, too overwhelming, you simplify. You return to basics. Gravity, resistance, effort. These things don't lie. They don't manipulate. They just are. You push against them, and they push back with absolute honesty. By the time Mendoza arrived around 2 p.m., I'd done several hundred reps of various exercises and worked up a solid sweat. He entered with a gray-haired woman, whose name I still didn't know. I'm Agent Reyes, she said, apparently reading my mind. I thought proper introductions were overdue. Anatoly Petrov, I replied. Though you probably know more about me than I remember about myself at this point. Mendoza sat in the chair while Reyes leaned against the wall. We need to discuss what happens next, he said. The raid last night was successful, but it's just the beginning. The people we arrested are mid-level operators. To get to Dmitry himself, to actually dismantle the organization, We need more.
We need details about operations, about money flow, about who's really in charge of what.
I've been out of that world for 20 years, I said. I don't know current operations. But you know how Dmitri thinks. You know the structure he builds, the patterns he follows. That's valuable intelligence. And more importantly, you're now a target. Which means the organization will be watching for you, trying to find you. We can use that. I didn't like where this was going. Use it how? Reyes took over. We want to draw them out. Make them commit resources to finding you. Force them to expose themselves. You'd be bait, essentially, but controlled bait. We'd protect you while using you to identify more of their network. So instead of just being a witness, you want me to be an active target. Paint an even bigger bullseye on my back. Yes, Mendoza said bluntly. But in exchange, we help protect the people you care about. We've already made contact with your friend Marcus in Texas. He's agreed to temporary relocation with his family until the situation resolves. We're working on the trainer in Florida. And Oksana? Reyes and Mendoza exchanged a look. That's complicated, Reyes said. Russia isn't exactly cooperative with us right now. We reached out through back channels, but we haven't been able to confirm contact. My blood went cold. What does that mean? Did you warn her or not? We sent messages through intermediaries. We don't know if they reached her. I stood up, rage flooding through me. So you're asking me to put my neck on the line while the one person Dmitri explicitly threatened might already be dead? That's your offer.
It's the best we can do, Mendoza said calmly. International operations take time. Coordination. We don't have the resources to extract a Russian national from Vladivostok on short notice.
Then get me on a plane. I'll extract her myself.
Absolutely not, Reyes said.
You leave this country, you're beyond our protection. Volkov's people would kill you before you made it out of the airport. Then she dies.
Is that what you're telling me?
That all of this, everything I've done, was for nothing because you can't protect the one person I actually care about. The room fell silent. I could feel my control slipping, the rage that I'd kept leashed for so long starting to break free. This was the problem with caring about people. It gave others leverage over you. Made you weak. Maybe Dmitri had been right all along. Maybe the only way to survive was to care about nothing and no one. To become a pure instrument, unencumbered by emotional attachments that could be exploited. But even as I thought it, I knew I didn't believe it. The moments in my life that had meant anything, that had felt real and true, were all connected to caring about someone. Oksana in Magadan. Marcus welcoming me into his gym. Danny looking at me with admiration and hope. Those connections were what made me human. Cutting them away to avoid vulnerability would be the same as dying. Just slower. Do you know what it's like to realize that the thing that makes you vulnerable is also the only thing that makes you worth saving?
In a moment, you'll see what I chose.
I have an idea, Mendoza said carefully.
It's risky, probably insane, but it might work.
We can't extract Oksana officially, but we could provide resources for an unofficial extraction. Money, documents, transportation arrangements.
You'd be on your own, completely deniable, but at least you'd have a chance.
In exchange for what? When you get back, you work with us fully. No holding back, no reservations. You help us draw out Volkov's organization and burn it to the ground. If I get back, I corrected. If you get back, he agreed. Reyes looked unhappy. This is against protocol. We'd be sending an untrained civilian into a foreign country to conduct an extraction operation with no official support. He's not untrained, Mendoza countered. He's probably the most qualified person for this specific mission.
He speaks Russian, knows the area, understands the threats. And more importantly, he's motivated.
He'll get it done or die trying. That's what I'm afraid of. The dying part. Then we're agreed, I said. Get me to Vladivostok with whatever resources you can provide. I'll bring Oksana back. Then I'll help you destroy everything Dmitri Volkov has built. Reyes shook her head but pulled out her phone. This is completely off the books. If you get caught, if this goes sideways, we never had this conversation. Understood. Understood.
She made several calls while Mendoza briefed me on what they could provide. 50,000 in cash, a passport under a different name, contacts in Vladivostok who could supply weapons if needed, and a cargo ship leaving from San Diego in 36 hours that would get me to Russia without going through official channels. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd had when I escaped Magadan with nothing but stolen money and desperation. "You'll have 72 hours once you land," Mendoza said. "After that, Volkov's people will have too much time to set traps. Get in, find her, get out. Don't try to be a hero. Don't try to settle old scores. Just complete the mission and come home." Home. Strange word for a federal safe house where I was essentially a prisoner. But I understood what he meant. Come back alive. Come back ready to finish what we started. They moved me that night, drove me to San Diego in an unmarked vehicle. The drive took hours, and I spent most of it in silence, running through what I remembered about Vladivostok. It had been 20 years and cities change. But the bones remained the same. The geography, the basic infrastructure, the way people move and think. The cargo ship was exactly what I expected. Rusty, old, crewed by men who asked no questions because they'd learned long ago that questions got you killed. The captain took the cash Reyes provided and pointed me to a container that had been modified with a cot, some supplies, and a chemical toilet. Luxury accommodations for someone being smuggled across the Pacific. The crossing took 11 days. 11 days of darkness and solitude and the constant rolling motion of the ocean. 11 days to think about everything that had led me to this moment. Every choice, every compromise, every time I'd run instead of fought. I thought about my father, that cold hard man who'd locked me in the root cellar to teach me about fear. What would he think if he could see me now? Probably nothing good. He believed in strength above all else, in never showing weakness, never letting emotions cloud judgment. He'd have said I was being a fool, risking everything for a woman I hadn't seen in 2 decades. But he'd been wrong about so many things. Strength without purpose is just violence. Control without compassion is just cruelty. I'd learned that the hard way, through years of being exactly what he tried to make me into and discovering that it left me hollow inside. The ship docked in Vladivostok on a gray morning that reminded me painfully of my youth. That particular quality of Russian light, thin and cold, that makes everything look slightly unreal. I left the container, thanked the captain with a nod he didn't return, and stepped onto Russian soil for the first time in 23 years. The city had changed more than I expected. New buildings, new infrastructure, but underneath it all, the same hard edge I remembered. This was a port city, a place where different worlds collided, and the collision wasn't always gentle. I had an address for Oksana's clinic, provided by Reyes's contacts. It was in a working-class neighborhood on the edge of the city, the kind of place where people minded their own business and didn't call the police unless absolutely necessary. I took a bus, paid in cash, kept my head down and my awareness up. The clinic was smaller than I'd imagined. Just a storefront with a faded sign and bars on the windows. Through the glass, I could see a waiting room with maybe a dozen people sitting on plastic chairs. Children with their mothers. Old men with the kind of coughs that came from too many years in factories. The people nobody else would treat because they couldn't pay. I watched from across the street for 2 hours, noting patterns, checking for surveillance. If Dimitri's people were here, they were being subtle about it. But that didn't mean they weren't watching. Patience was key. Rush in blindly, and I'd get us both killed. Finally, as the sun started to set and the last patients left, I crossed the street and tried the door. Locked. I knocked, 3 quick raps. A voice from inside. "We're closed. Come back tomorrow at 8. "Oksana," I said in Russian. "It's Anatoly. I need to talk to you." Silence. Long enough that I wondered if she'd even heard me, or if she'd heard and was calling someone to report an intruder. Then the lock clicked, and the door opened. She looked older, of course. We both did. But her eyes were the same. That particular shade of gray-green I'd remembered in dreams. She stared at me for a long moment, and I couldn't read her expression. Shock, fear, anger, maybe all 3. "You shouldn't be here," she finally said. "It's not safe." "I know. That's why I came. Dimitri found me. He's using you as leverage. I need to get you out of Russia, tonight if possible." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "After 20 years? After you left me in that place and never looked back?
Now you come to save me.
The words hit like punches. Each one deserved. I know. I'm sorry.
I told myself I was protecting you by leaving you behind, but the truth is I was just protecting myself.
I was a coward. But right now, none of that matters. Dimitri's dying, and before he goes, he wants to settle old debts.
You're on his list because of me. So please, let me fix this one thing. Let me get you somewhere safe. She studied my face, looking for something. Truth, maybe. Or sincerity. Whatever she found must have been enough because she nodded slowly. Come inside. We need to talk. The clinic was exactly what you'd expect from someone who'd spent years in Magadan. Functional, efficient, no wasted space or resources.
She led me to a back office and closed the door. I knew this might come eventually, she said, sitting behind a desk covered with medical files.
When I heard about Dimitri's cancer, I started making preparations. I have documents, money saved, contacts who can help me disappear.
I don't need you to rescue me, Anatoly.
I've been taking care of myself for a very long time. Pride flared in me, hearing that. This was the woman I'd known in Magadan, the survivor who'd found ways to maintain her humanity in the worst possible environment. Of course she'd been preparing. Of course she had plans.
Then let me help you execute those plans, I said.
I have resources, connections through the Americans who are trying to bring down Dimitri's organization. We can get you somewhere safe, somewhere he can never reach. The Americans, she repeated.
You're working with them now?
You've changed sides. I've changed, period. Or I'm trying to. The life I lived in Magadan, the things I did, I can't undo them. But I can try to do something better now.
Something that means something. She was quiet for a moment, then said, There's a ship leaving tomorrow morning for South Korea. I have passage arranged under a false name. From there, I can disappear into Southeast Asia. I have friends in Thailand who will help me establish a new identity.
That's good. That's smart. But let me come with you. At least until we're clear of Vladivostok. Dimitri's people might be watching.
Are they watching now?
Did they follow you here? I don't think so. I was careful. But I can't be certain. As if in answer, the window behind her shattered. Glass exploded inward, and I heard the distinctive crack of suppressed gunfire. I threw myself at Oksana, knocking her to the floor as bullets tore through the space where she'd been sitting. Back door, she shouted. Through the supply room. We crawled across the floor as more shots punched through the walls. Whoever was shooting had professional weapons and knew how to use them. This wasn't some street-level crew. This was Dimitri's elite people, the ones he trusted with the important jobs. We made it to the supply room, and Oksana grabbed a bag that had been hidden behind boxes of medical supplies. Always prepared. We ran through the back door into an alley, and I heard car doors slamming out front. They'd be coming around any second.
This way, Oksana said, leading me through a maze of alleys and side streets she obviously knew well.
We ran for maybe 10 minutes, taking random turns, until we emerged in a different neighborhood entirely. She led me to an apartment building and up 3 flights of stairs to a unit that looked empty. Safe house, she explained, unlocking the door. I have 3 of them scattered around the city. Learn from you, actually. Always have an exit strategy. Inside, she finally allowed herself to show emotion. Her hands were shaking as she locked the door behind us. They found me faster than I expected. Dimitri must have activated every resource he has. Because of me, I said. Because I betrayed him and he knows we were connected. Maybe. Or maybe he was always going to come for me eventually. Men like Dimitri don't leave loose ends. She looked at me directly.
How many people died because of what you and I did in Magadan?
The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? The money you stole. The network you disrupted. How many people died in the aftermath? How many scores were settled? How many power vacuums were filled with violence? I'd never let myself think about it in those terms. I told myself I was escaping, surviving, doing what I had to do. But she was right. My actions had consequences that rippled outward, affecting people I'd never met, creating suffering I'd never witnessed but had certainly caused. I don't know, I admitted. Probably dozens. Maybe more.
And now we're doing it again.
Working with the Americans to bring down Dmitri's organization. More violence, more death, more chaos. When does it end, Anatoly? When do we stop being instruments of destruction and become something else?
I don't know that either, I said.
But I know doing nothing isn't the answer. Letting Dmitri operate unchallenged, letting the violence continue, that's not better.
At least this way, we're trying to end it.
To break the cycle. Or we're just continuing it under a different flag. We sat in silence for a while, both of us processing what had just happened.
Finally, Oksana said, "The ship leaves at 6 a.m.
We have 12 hours to get to the port without being killed. Do your American friends have any resources here that can help?" I pulled out the phone Reyes had given me, a satellite phone that supposedly couldn't be tracked. I called the emergency number, and she answered on the second ring. "Situation?" Reyes asked without preamble. "Compromised. They found us. We need extraction. Port of Vladivostok, 6 a.m. Can you make it there safely?" "Unknown. We'll try. I'll see what I can arrange. But Petrov, understand this. If you don't make it, if Volkov's people take you out, this whole operation falls apart. The information you provided was good, but we need you alive to testify, to help us understand the bigger picture." "Understood. We'll be there." I hung up and looked at Oksana. "We have to move again. This location is temporary, but they're good at finding people. We can't stay in one place too long." She nodded and repacked her bag with practiced efficiency. Whatever she'd brought with her was essential, carefully chosen. Documents, money, probably some medical supplies. Everything else was expendable.
We spent the next 12 hours moving through Vladivostok like ghosts. Changed locations every 2 hours, never established patterns, stayed in crowds when possible and shadows when necessary.
It was exhausting, the constant vigilance, the perpetual awareness of every person around us, every vehicle that passed, every unusual sound. But it was also familiar. This was how I'd lived for years after escaping Magadan, always looking over my shoulder, always ready to run.
I'd thought I'd left this life behind, but apparently, it had just been waiting for me to return. Around 4 a.m., we made our way toward the port. The streets were mostly empty at this hour, which was both good and bad. Easier to spot threats, but also easier to be spotted. We stayed off main roads, moved through industrial areas and shipping yards. A quarter-mile from the port, I saw them. 2 vehicles, parked in positions that blocked the most direct routes to the docks. They weren't trying to be subtle anymore. This was a perimeter, a net they'd thrown out hoping to catch us. "We need another way in," I said to Oksana. She pulled out her phone and checked something. "There's a fence along the eastern edge of the port.
Chain link. Probably climbable. If we can get over that, we can approach the ship from the water side. Lead the way."
We circled wide, adding 30 minutes to our journey but avoiding the obvious checkpoints. The fence was exactly as she described, maybe 10 feet high with razor wire at the top. Not impossible, but not easy either. I found a section where the fence met a loading structure and used it to climb up and over, avoiding the worst of the razor wire. Got a few cuts anyway, nothing serious. Oksana followed with the agility of someone who'd climbed many fences in her life.
We dropped into the port facility and immediately went low, moving between shipping containers and equipment. The ship was visible now, a medium-sized cargo vessel that looked more rust than steel. Perfect for smuggling people who needed to disappear. As we approached, I saw someone step out from behind a container. Instinctively, I moved to put myself between him and Oksana, reaching for the knife I'd acquired during our time in the city. But the man raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. "Anatoly Petrov?" he asked in accented English.
"Agent Reyes sent me.
I'm here to make sure you get aboard safely."
I didn't lower the knife.
"How do I know that's true?" "She said you'd be suspicious. Said to tell you that Marcus and his family are safe in a location you describe as where everything's bigger." "That makes sense. Texas." Marcus was in Texas. Only Reyes would know to phrase it that way. I relaxed slightly but kept the knife ready. "All right. What's the situation?" "Volkov's people have the main gates covered, but they're spread thin. Ship leaves in 45 minutes. If we move now, we can get you aboard before they realize where you are. He led us through the maze of containers and equipment, moving with the confidence of someone who'd done this many times before. We reached the ship without incident, and a crew member lowered a rope ladder. "Go," I told Oksana. "I'll cover the rear." She climbed quickly, and I followed, the knife still in my hand. At the top, another crew member pulled us aboard and gestured toward a container. "Inside." Quickly. We entered the modified container, and I finally allowed myself to believe we might actually make it. Oksana sat on one of the cots and let out a long breath. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for coming, for risking yourself. Even if it was 20 years too late. I should have come back for you," I said. "Should have found a way. I was wrong to leave you behind. You were surviving. We both were. You can't judge the decisions we made in that place by normal standards. Magadan wasn't normal. Nothing about it was." The ship's engines rumbled to life beneath us. We were moving. Within minutes, we'd cleared the port and were heading into open water. The immediate danger was past, but I knew this was far from over. The crossing back to America took 12 days, just like the trip out. 12 days for Oksana and me to talk, really talk, for the first time in 2 decades. We spoke about Magadan, about the things we'd done to survive, about the guilt and shame and occasional pride we felt about who we'd become. She told me about the years after I left, how Dmitri had questioned everyone, convinced someone had helped me. She'd been beaten, interrogated, threatened. But she'd revealed nothing because she'd genuinely known nothing about my escape plans. Eventually, they'd let her go, and she'd left Magadan when her contract expired. Spent years rebuilding herself, trying to do good to balance the bad she'd witnessed and occasionally enabled. I told her about my own journey. The years of running, the constant fear, the slow process of building a new identity, the discovery of training and discipline as a way to impose order on chaos. The YouTube channel that had started as a joke and become something meaningful, a way to connect with people without ever really revealing myself. "We're both broken," she said one night as we sat in the darkness of the container, listening to the ocean. "Magadan broke us in ways that can never fully heal. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the cracks are what let the light in." That's very poetic for someone who spent 4 years in a Siberian labor camp. She laughed. "I read a lot after I got out. Tried to understand what happened to us, how trauma works, how people recover. Or don't recover. Turns out the human mind is incredibly resilient, but also incredibly fragile. We can survive almost anything, but we never really leave it behind. So what do? Just carry it forever? Maybe. Or maybe we use it. Turn the damage into something useful. You became strong because of what you survived. I became compassionate. Different responses to the same trauma, but both valid." When we finally docked in San Diego, Reyes was waiting with a small team. They processed us quickly, efficiently, and drove us back to the safe house where this had all begun. Mendoza was there, looking exhausted but satisfied. The raid on Trans-Mexico Logistica led to 3 more operations. We've arrested 47 people connected to Volkov's organization in the past 2 weeks. We're dismantling it piece by piece. And Dmitri himself? I asked. Still untouchable. Still in Russia, surrounded by protection. But his network is collapsing. His money is frozen. His power is evaporating. He might outlive his organization at this point. Which makes him more dangerous, Oksana observed. A dying man with nothing left to lose is capable of anything. She was right, of course. But I was too tired to worry about it right then. I'd completed the mission. I'd saved someone who mattered. I'd struck a blow against an organization that had controlled too much for too long. It wasn't redemption, not completely. But it was something. Over the next 3 months, I worked with Mendoza and Reyes to provide every piece of information I could about Dmitri Volkov's operations. How he thought, how he structured his organization, the patterns he followed. It wasn't much after 20 years, but combined with the information they were extracting from arrested operatives, it was enough. They dismantled the Volkov organization systematically, piece by piece. Key lieutenants arrested, money seized, operations shut down. Dmitri himself remained beyond reach, protected by Russian authorities who either worked for him or feared him. But without his network, without his power base, he was just a dying old man raging against the inevitable. Oksana stayed in America, began working with an organization that helped immigrants and refugees access medical care. She was good at it, better than I'd ever been at anything except lifting weights and hurting people. Watching her find purpose, watching her heal even as she carried her scars, gave me something I hadn't expected: hope. As for me, I couldn't go back to my old life. The YouTube channel, the gym pranks, the persona I'd built, all of it was compromised. Dimitri's people knew my face, knew my story. Going public again would just paint a target on everyone around me. But Mendoza had an idea. "We're building a task force," he said, "focused on dismantling criminal organizations that operate across borders. People with your particular skills and experience could be valuable. Not as an agent, not officially, but as a consultant. Someone who understands how these people think." "You want me to hunt people like Dimitri?" "I want you to help us stop people like Dimitri from creating the next generation of people like you. Break the cycle, like you said." It wasn't what I'd planned. It wasn't the peaceful retirement I'd imagined, making videos and inspiring people to be strong. But maybe it was what I needed. A way to use everything I'd learned, everything I'd survived, for something that actually mattered. I thought about my father again, that cold hard man who'd tried to forge me in his image. He'd wanted me to be strong, to be fearless, to never show weakness. He'd succeeded in a way, but not how he'd intended. I was strong enough to admit weakness, fearless enough to feel fear and act anyway. And I'd learned that showing vulnerability wasn't weakness at all. It was the only real courage. 6 months after Vladivostok, I got a call from Reyes. "Dmitry Volkov is dead. Cancer took him last night. Thought you'd want to know." I felt nothing. No relief, no satisfaction, no closure. Just a mild acknowledgement that a chapter had ended. The man who'd controlled so much of my life was gone, but the damage he'd done lived on. In me, in Oksana, in countless others who'd been touched by his organization. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "There's something else." Before he died, he sent a message. Through his lawyer, completely legal, nothing we could stop. He wanted you to know that he forgave you. Said you were just doing what he'd taught you to do. Survive at any cost. Said he respected that. I almost laughed. Forgiveness from a man who'd ordered dozens, maybe hundreds of deaths. As if his absolution meant anything. But in a strange way it did. Not because I needed his forgiveness, but because it meant he'd understood. At the end, he'd recognized that we were both products of the same system, the same brutal logic that said survival was the only virtue that mattered. But I'd learned something Dmitri never did. Survival isn't enough. You have to survive for something, toward something. Otherwise, you're just a machine processing time until you stop. That night, I went to the gym. Not to train for videos or to prank bodybuilders, but just to lift. To feel the weight in my hands, the strain in my muscles, the simple honest feedback of gravity and resistance. This was real. This was true. This was the foundation everything else was built on. Oksana found me there around midnight. She didn't say anything, just started stretching in the corner. After a while, she joined me, and we trained together in comfortable silence. Two broken people who'd survived the worst, trying to build something better from the pieces. As I loaded more weight onto the bar, I thought about the question she'd asked in Vladivostok. When does it end? When do we stop being instruments of destruction and become something else? Maybe the answer was, never completely. The capacity for violence, for survival at any cost, that never really goes away. But you can choose what you build around it. You can use it as a foundation for something better, something that helps instead of hurts. I lifted the weight, felt it press against my limits, and pushed through. Not for YouTube, not for views or validation. Just for me, for Oksana, for everyone who'd survived something they shouldn't have and kept going anyway. The bar rose steadily, inevitably, like everything else in life. You put in the work, you pay the price, and slowly, impossibly, you become stronger than you were. Not perfect. Never perfect. Just stronger, better, more than you were before. I racked the weight and sat down on the bench, breathing hard. Oksana sat next to me. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, I said and meant it. I think I finally am. We sat there for a long time, two survivors who'd found their way through the darkness and into something that resembled light. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined when I started running 20 years ago. It wasn't the peaceful retirement, the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. But it was real. It was honest. It was mine. And that was enough. The Ghost of Magadan had finally stopped running. Not because the danger was gone, but because I'd learned something more important than survival. I'd learned how to live. With my scars, with my past, with the weight of everything I'd done and everything that had been done to me. The iron had taught me strength. Magadan had taught me survival. But Oksana, Marcus, Danny, everyone I'd connected with in my new life, they taught me the most important lesson of all. You don't have to be defined by the worst thing you've ever done. You can choose every single day to be something more than your past. Something better than your circumstances. Something that makes the suffering mean something. I stood up and walked toward the door. Behind me, the gym was quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the echo of weights that had been lifted and would be lifted again tomorrow. Outside, the California night was warm and clear. Stars visible despite the city lights. Somewhere out there, people were suffering like I'd suffered. Fighting like I'd fought. Surviving like I'd survived. And maybe, just maybe, some of them would find their way through. Would learn that strength without purpose is meaningless, that survival without meaning is just delayed death, that the only thing that makes the darkness bearable is the light we create for each other. I took a deep breath of night air and smiled. The weight had been heavy. But I'd lifted it anyway. And I'd become strong enough to carry it forward, into whatever came next. The end.